Frayed nerves after a false alarm in Hawaii prompts fears that devastation is imminent. A phone alert sent to more than 1 million people warning of an incoming ballistic missile attack. Residents and tourists waking up to this alarming message on their phones. Ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. Minutes passed before officials issued a clarification. Hawaii Governor David Ige trying to get to the bottom of it.
This should not have happened. We are investigating the sequence of events that occurred. An error was made in emergency management, which allowed this false alarm to be sent.
We have Fox team coverage on this. Phil Keating has White House reaction from President Trump's Florida estate. But we begin with Brian Yennis, who is following this developing story from our New York City newsroom. Brian?
Kelly, look, this all began at 8:07 Hawaii time when that alert was sent out. Let's put it on the screen again so people can see it. Ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. This is the text message that 1.3 million Hawaiians got this morning. This is not a drill. The emergency alert system also went out on television and radio. This is what it was like to be in Hawaii this morning when that emergency alert system came on while you were watching TV at 8:07 this morning. Listen.
Drill. If you are indoors, stay indoors. If you are outdoors, seek immediate shelter in a building.
Just so surreal, a nightmare scenario. Well, the Hawaii Emergency Management ended up tweeting this 13 minutes after the alert got sent out. No missile threat to Hawaii. That's it. No explanation. They just sent that. The Hawaii Emergency Management then, after that, it took them an additional 20 minutes to send a tweet that was a false alarm. But once they sent this tweet out, the word started getting around. Take a listen to this.
Yes, attention to all units, according to state warning point, it's just a drill. Attention to all units, it's just a drill.
Yeah, that was the police scanner. So police finding out that it was just a drill. But again, it took 38 minutes from when that first push notification was sent saying that there was an inbound ballistic missile coming to Hawaii for when the new text message was sent out saying that there is no missile threat or danger to the state of Hawaii. Repeat, false alarm. The governor of Hawaii and the head of Hawaii's emergency management wrapped up a press conference just about a half hour ago, and they said this was all a result of human error. Someone during an internal drill hit the wrong button on a screen, which allowed for these messages to be sent. And not only did this person hit the wrong button, when they were asked if they really wanted to do this, a prompt came up. They hit yes again, and that is why everyone got these messages. Take a listen.
There was no automated way to send a false alarm cancellation. We had to initiate a manual process, and that was why it took a while to notify everyone.
The consequence of this is obviously bad. I'm working on credibility now because we've worked so hard to get this in place. That's why I want to tell the public right now is, again, this was a mistake on our part, but don't let that stop as far as the preparation and the warning time.
And they've already instituted changes, Kelly. They say now it takes 2 people to initiate that alert, not just one. And they're now also looking into why not everyone got a cell phone emergency alert. Another big concern in case this was actually the real deal.
Absolutely. Brian, what's been the reaction so far on social media?
Well, we've been getting firsthand accounts all day. Look at this tweet. This is from Mr. Peterson, sent out about, 10 minutes after the initial alert. Under mattresses in the bathtub with my wife, baby, and in-laws. Please, Lord, let this bomb threat not be real. Another tweet from someone also on Hawaii saying, quote, from Sydney, people were sheltering in the basement. People were crying and holding each other. It was actually scary for a few minutes. And then there's just outrage from senators and representatives alike. Senator Brian Schatz saying again, false alarm. What happened today is totally inexcusable. The whole state was terrified. There needs to be tough and quick accountability and a fixed process. And if you look at this video, this has been going around all over social media. A video that originated from Snapchat. It's a man telling a child to climb down a manhole following this false alarm. Incredible. This is how real it was for people. Yeah, it was a false alarm on the text, but it was very real for people for about 38 minutes. Someone there trying to legitimately save a child's life by climbing into a manhole. Again, this is 20 minutes from launch, if there were to be a launch from North Korea, to landing in Hawaii, just 20 minutes. And people are advised during that time they only have about 10 or 12 minutes to react. And the best bet is to stay inside or to find cover wherever you are, including even laying down on the ground if you're driving. So a lot of questions, a lot of eyes open after this event today, Kelly.
Yeah, and people still searching for answers. Brian Yennis, thank you for that report. The stark reality still unfolding. President Trump getting briefed on the situation in Florida, where he's spending the weekend at his Mar-a-Lago resort. Phil Keating is reporting from West Palm Beach near the president's home. Phil, where was the president when all of this went down?
Well, President Trump was still at his Trump International Golf Club just down the street, enjoying 18 holes of golf and also discussing China, NAFTA, and trade in general with his U.S. trade ambassador. And then suddenly that quite terrifying alert via email, social media, and cell phones went out to everybody that was subscribed on the islands of Hawaii. A 20-minute false alarm, as it turns out, and for those Hawaiians receiving these alerts via cell phone, it took a full 38 minutes for the false alarm to come through. In that time, what else could anybody believe other than an incoming intercontinental missile, possibly nuclear tipped, was on its way to Honolulu? Clearly very terrifying for anybody who was paying any attention to this that early in the morning. Shortly after arriving back at his winter White House, well, the White House on Palm Beach at Mar-a-Lago, a White House official released this short statement, and this is all we've heard from the White House all day, by the way. The president has been briefed on the state of Hawaii's emergency management exercise. This was purely a state exercise. And at Pacific Command, responsible for the Indo-Asia Pacific region, this statement came out during it all from Commander David Benham. U.S. PACOM has detected no ballistic missile threat to Hawaii. Earlier message was sent in error. The state of Hawaii will send out a correction message as soon as possible. Now, again, take a look at your screen. This was the alert that first went out this morning, 8:07 a.m. Hawaii time, just as people were just getting up, getting their coffee. Ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek shelter. This is not a drill. Truly, this accident, really a very bad accident, and perhaps the worst accident you could even imagine, scaring everybody in Hawaii into the position of believing that perhaps they only had minutes left to live. It's being blamed on a state worker who accidentally touched a button or flipped a switch during shift change, and clearly all of that's now being looked into. Kelly?
So, Phil, as we've seen from the news conference that came from Hawaii with the governor and the emergency management, not only is Hawaii investigating it and offering more training, we understand that the FCC is also investigating it.
Absolutely, it is. The Federal Communications Commission monitors and regulates all intrastate as well as interstate wire communications, radio, television, satellite, and all of that must be used via license responsibly. So the FCC is also investigating this, as is, of course, the state of Hawaii. And Governor David Ige released this statement today, quote, "While I am thankful this morning's alert was a false alarm, the public must have confidence in our emergency alert system. I am working to get to the bottom of this so we can not let this happen again, basically, in the future." So an incredibly scary day down in Hawaii. Of course, Hawaii, Alaska, as well as the West Coast, Washington, Oregon, and California have all been on high alert ever since the Supreme Commander Kim Jong-un in North Korea has been so threatening with all of his missile tests of note. Kelly?
Phil Keating reporting from West Palm Beach, Florida, where the president is Mar-a-Lago this weekend. Phil, thank you. And as the FCC launches its investigation, a growing number of lawmakers are calling for accountability. Here's part of my interview with Hawaii Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard earlier today on America's News Headquarters.
What they have just gone through is that immediate reality of knowing they've got 15 minutes to take shelter. Where can they take shelter? Where can they take shelter that will protect them and their families from a nuclear bomb coming their way? This just points to the failure of our country's leaders for decades that have put Hawaii and this country in this position today.
So let's bring in Rebecca Heinrichs now, senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. She's also a former national security advisor to a congressional lawmaker who served on the House Armed Services Committee. She also helped launch a bipartisan Congressional Missile Defense Caucus. Rebecca, thanks for joining us this evening.
Good to be here.
You know, I'm struck by the fact that Vern Miyagi, who is head of the emergency management there in Hawaii, was talking about he suspected that this was a false alarm when he realized what was going on, because he said, well, he's just talked to South Korea, referring to Kim Jong-un. So in contrast to this false alarm, there is the stark reality that there is a threat for Hawaii because of the missiles and the proliferation of the nuclear armament within North Korea.
And I knew, what he meant by making that comment, but my initial thought was the American people are not all paying attention to foreign affairs right now. It's not their responsibility to keep up with what's going on. That's the American government's responsibility. And so, the American government has to provide protection of the American people. Obviously, this is an egregious error on the part of the state of Hawaii for sending out this false alarm. And it took far too long to send out the correction. But I would just say, too, the rest of the country has now just had a tiny taste of what our fellow citizens experience on a daily basis living in Hawaii, so close to North Korea. And remember, compared to Hawaii, Guam, where American citizens are, that's a chip shot for North Korea and the kind of missiles that they have there.
Also, our ally Japan, which is nearby Guam, and you look at the entire Pacific. And for that matter, you look at the entire west coast of the United States, and one has to wonder, is this threat a clear and present danger to the United States? Should this continue to escalate to the point that Kim Jong-un should continue to launch these missiles and perhaps even make a mistake that goes horribly wrong and lands in one of our territories or in one of our provinces?
The North Korean regime is completely committed to achieving a reliable nuclear ICBM capability. So you will constantly hear people say, well, they haven't finally tested that last part where they re-enter in the atmosphere, that the kill vehicle, the warhead back into the atmosphere. Nobody should take any reassurance from that, because they're going to continue testing until they're confident that they have that capability. So what the U.S. government has to do is get serious about missile defense. We do have a missile defense system in place to provide protection against ballistic missiles from all 50 states. I recently talked to General Hyten. He's the commander of our missile defense systems and our nuclear weapons. He assured me he's confident that our system is able to do that. But it is not as good as it could be, and that's because the last administration, this is not to score a point on Barack Obama, President Obama cut our missile defense systems significantly while in office, and we are playing catch up, and we got to stay ahead of the threat.
Not to mention the sequestration that went into effect under President Obama's administration. I should also point out that Lucas Tomlinson, our Pentagon producer, also pointed out the fact that there are 44 interceptors that could have been launched should a strike really take place. And that's not nearly enough to deal with an overwhelming threat from North Korea, or for that matter, any threat from a nuclear capability.
Well, our current system is designed just to handle sort of limited threats coming out of Iran and North Korea. But right, that's right. There's 44 interceptors in the ground. I was just in Fort Greely, Alaska, where those interceptors are deployed this past year. I climbed down in one of those silos and got to see the system. It's a reliable system. It's good. Of the interceptors we have in the ground today, 5 out of 6 of the last tests have been successful. But that's not good enough. It needs to be a lot better. I will say, too, one thing that, the North Koreans should not take a victory lap over what happened today, because I will say this: there was not a sensor error on the part of our system. At no point did we think that there was a missile headed towards the American homeland. We are watching them, and our systems can be better, but we can see what they're doing. All this should do now is galvanize support from the American people to get behind the president to handle the North Korean problem.
Rebecca Heinrich, good of you to point that out. Thank you for your perspective as well on this important issue. Rebecca Heinrich, thank you.
Thanks.
Also coming up with the Fox Report, other major story developments we're following, including including President Trump threatening to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal in the future if his conditions are not met for a new agreement. What Iran is saying and why the situation has several other world powers concerned. Plus, the situation remains dangerous after those deadly mudslides in California. Iran taking a hard line with the U.S., saying it will refuse any changes to the 2015 nuclear deal. President Trump reluctantly extended the accord yesterday, but vowed to pull out in a few months if his demands are not met. The president's position now prompting concern from the 5 other world powers involved in the deal. Kitty Logan reports from London.
Hi, Kelly. Well, the Iranian Foreign Ministry issued a statement today saying it won't accept any changes to the nuclear deal at any stage. Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Zarif met with EU officials in Brussels on Thursday. President Trump wants these European countries which signed up to the Iran deal to agree to make changes to it. However, several of those countries, including Britain, have called on President Trump not to try to change the agreement. Mr. Zarif tweeted a response too, saying the suggestion to amend the accord was, quote, an attempt to undermine a solid multinational agreement. The Iranian nuclear deal was agreed in 2015 after many months of tough talks. China and Russia have also signed up to it. President Trump has often criticized the agreement, and Iran has also accused the US of not fully complying with it. Iran has always maintained its nuclear program is for peaceful purposes, and it says, although it intends to stick to the deal as it stands, it might not do so if it's changed. Yesterday, President Trump extended the suspension of economic sanctions against Iran, which, in terms of the deal, are in return for Iran not developing its nuclear program. But he's warned the US will eventually pull out if other countries don't agree to amendments. And yesterday, the US imposed new sanctions on Iranian officials. This is because of Iran's development of an intercontinental ballistic missile program, as well as allegations of human rights abuses. Iran says it will retaliate. Kelly?
Kitty Logan from London. Thanks. Representatives from North and South Korea have agreed to meet 2 days from now for follow-up talks on next month's Winter Olympics. That's the word out of Seoul today. The meeting at the DMZ comes less than a week after the two nations held their first face-to-face talks in 2 years. That's when the South agreed to host a delegation of athletes from the North. Monday's talks could determine how closely the two countries will interact on the world stage now, less than 4 weeks away. Much more coming up on the false alarm in Hawaii. We'll break down the timeline from the moment this message first went out to when officials issued their first correction, plus new revelations on the worst mass shooting in U.S. history that took place last October in Las Vegas. This just in. The death toll right now stands at 19 following those deadly mudslides that slammed Southern California. And today, the army of search and rescue crews and recovery workers swelled to more than 2,000 as they wade through mud and debris littered with nails, broken glass, and tangled power lines, searching for at least 5 missing people. Authorities have now declared most of Montecito a public safety exclusion zone, which means those who stayed behind will be subject to arrest. That mandatory evacuation order could be in place for the next 2 weeks.
We're trying to decide which way to go because we may be trapped one way or another until the freeway's clear.
There were alerts and multiple media outlets and forms of notification to let the residents know of the potential impact of this. Right now, we still are in a rescue mode, so we don't know what is out there.
So far, about 65 homes have been destroyed and some 400 others have been damaged. Disturbing new details on the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history. Unsealed court documents revealed the gunman exchanged emails on buying rifles and bump stocks months before he fatally shot 58 people at a music festival in Las Vegas. And some of these latest revelations show the killer wanted to make investigators' jobs as hard as possible. Will Card picks up the story from Los Angeles. Will?
Search warrants show the gunman had an arsenal in both his hotel room, one of his homes, and his car. Authorities discovered more than 20 guns and hundreds of rounds of ammunition in the Mandalay Bay hotel room, where the shooter was perched as he unloaded on concertgoers. 58 people were killed and more than 500 injured in the deadliest mass shooting in modern American history. We've also learned the gunman's girlfriend, Mary Lou Danley, told law enforcement that her fingerprints would likely be found on the bullets used during the attack. Interestingly, warrants show she deleted her Facebook page an hour before authorities announced the shooter's name publicly. Danley has not been charged and is said to be cooperating. We've also learned as authorities continue to look for a motive, the gunman may have been emailing himself. Those emails include a discussion about trying out bump stocks, a piece of equipment that allows a gun to fire more rapidly. 12 of those were found in the shooter's hotel room, and as a result, there's been a call to ban bump stocks, and the governor in Connecticut has proposed legislation to do just that. But not all gun store owners agree.
While bump stocks don't change the mechanics of the weapon they are attached to, they increase the rate of fire to machine gun-like speeds. Simply put, these devices are cheap, they are deadly, and they are completely and utterly unnecessary in our society.
The way I see it, it's just a recreational thing, you know. It's not anything too dangerous. And if they want to ban it, it's their choice, but I don't really question things like that.
There is currently legislation in Congress to ban bump stocks. At the same time, the DOJ is studying the legality of certain bump stocks, a process that could take between 8 and 12 months. Back to you.
Will Carr reporting from Los Angeles. Thank you, Will. Well, we are just days away from a fast approaching deadline for Congress to pass a spending bill. And a deal on DACA remains a key sticking point. The president tweeting today that Democrats are getting in the way. Now they're responding. But the question looms large. Can both sides find common ground? Also, back to our top story about a frightening wake-up call for people in Hawaii as this false alarm rattles the entire state. So what was our military's reaction at the time of this alarm? A report from the Pentagon next.
This is regrettable. It won't happen again because the criticality of the time on this type of event and the credibility of this alarm going out is critical for us saving lives.
I'm Kelly Wright, and this is the Fox Report. It's the bottom of the hour if you're just joining us. Hawaii breathing a sigh of relief after a false alarm on a missile attack sent residents into a panic. Folks there are waking up to the following push alert on their phones. Ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. Hawaii Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard then tweeted this: Hawaii, this is a false alarm. There is no incoming missile to Hawaii. I have confirmed with officials there is no incoming missile. Lucas Tomlinson is reporting now from the Pentagon. And Lucas, so what is the process in place for the state to cancel a false warning?
Well, Kelly, in a frank admission, the governor of Hawaii just moments ago said that until today, there was no plan to send out a correction notice to a wrong message.
We didn't have a process in place to send a message. We didn't have a message scripted that said this is a false alarm. You know, we were not prepared for that. The fact that an alert was issued, that was incorrect. So we have built that now.
At 8:07 local time, a mass text alert was sent about an incoming ballistic missile to everyone in Hawaii. 13 minutes later, Hawaii's Emergency Management Agency sent out a tweet, not a correction to mobile phones, and then another 15 minutes passed before the U.S. Military Pacific Command, headquartered in Hawaii, issued a statement saying it had not detected a ballistic missile launch. It took then another 10 minutes for the correction to finally be sent out by Hawaii's Emergency Management Agency, nearly 40 minutes after the initial false alarm. And as for the military reaction, you didn't see anybody in uniform at that press conference, did you, Kelly?
Not at all, not in the least. So when is the next test of this system, Lucas?
Well, the head of Hawaii's Emergency Management Agency said all tests have been suspended until further notice.
The governor has directed that we hold off any more tests until we get this squared away. What has already been put in place is a two-person rule, that during a drill, there will always be two people there before the button is pushed, for both drills and for the actual alert.
Less than 2 months ago, Hawaii brought back Cold War-style nuclear sirens amid the rising North Korean threat. And a few of them went off, we were told during the press conference. It's not clear why some went off, but others did not. There are 44 ballistic missile interceptor missiles right now in the ground at 2 Air Force bases in Alaska and Southern California, Kelly. Congress has in place a plan to spend billions more in the budget to push that number to 100 interceptor missiles. But unless Congress doesn't pass a budget by Friday, the government shuts down. Kelly?
Lucas Thomason, thank you, reporting from the Pentagon tonight. Coming up in the Fox Report, we'll talk to one person who experienced this scare that we've just talked about. Can you imagine what it's like to wake up to an alert of an incoming ballistic missile? Think about it. President Trump now blaming Democrats for holding up or reaching a deal on DACA just days after he reportedly used vulgar language during a bipartisan immigration meeting. The president denied using that language, and today he tweeted, "The Democrats are all talk and no action. They are doing nothing to fix DACA. Great opportunity missed. Too bad." And now the Democrats are firing back.
The idea that it's the Democrats' fault, who have no power to put anything on the floor, that we haven't taken action on these issues, that's playing politics. Saying that it's politics is basically playing politics. Why don't we just do what Congress is supposed to do? When members of Congress agree, Democrats and Republicans, on an issue, let's vote on it.
Molly Henneberg joins us live now with more details from Washington. Hi, Molly.
Hi, Kelly. As far as what Democrats are proposing for immigration, right now there's no comprehensive immigration bill that can get 60 votes in the Senate and get the president's signature. So Democrats say Congress should move on DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which protects some 800,000 illegal minors from deportation. And also they want them to act on the DREAM Act, which gives them a pathway, those illegal minors, to legal status. The top House Democrat Nancy Pelosi is asking for a DACA and DREAM-only piece of legislation now, saying in a statement yesterday, quote, "In October, the president wrongly decided to terminate DACA. Since that time, the president has constantly said he supports DACA. What is clear is that we must insist upon a clean DREAM Act, which is supported overwhelmingly by the American people, has bipartisan support in Congress, and must be enacted in January." DACA is set to end on March 5th. Kelly?
But, Molly, will Republicans get on board with this?
With the Democrats' plan, not likely. They want border security, too, and they say they've been promised funding for a border wall before, and then the funding didn't come through.
I'm so mistrustful. I think that we keep our promise first and then not give up our leverage until we've built that wall.
Legislators had hoped to wrap up immigration reform in a bill to keep funding the government. But that spending bill has to be done by next Friday, and it doesn't appear at this point that there's enough agreement to include immigration in that legislation. Kelly?
Molly Henneberg reporting from Washington. Thanks, Molly. For more on this, let's bring in Hugo Gurdon, editorial director for the Washington Examiner. Hugo, good of you to join us this evening. So,
good evening, Kelly.
This is quite a plight for our members of Congress, Republican and Democrat, and the president as well. They can't seem to find any point of agreement. And how do you see them going forward? What's the next step?
I mean, I think that eventually there will be an extension of DACA, but it will absolutely involve, in parallel to that, some funding for the border wall. It's a really interesting thing, Kelly, that you know, the president tweeted out this morning that the Democrats were all talk and no action. And there's some truth in this, because the Democrats actually like DACA as an issue, and this is an election year, so they can go forward if DACA is not fixed and blame the president and the Republicans for that and get some political capital going into the midterm elections. And so they have a very high demand, which is pass a clean DREAM DACA fix. And what they mean by clean is no wall funding. Wall. And the great thing for them is they don't want President Trump to get what would be a victory on his most well-remembered promise from the election, which was to build a wall. So, you know, they think that they can go towards the shutdown of the government, that they can get the Republicans blamed for that, which is normally what happens. So it's a bit of a quandary for the Republicans, but I think ultimately the Democrats are going to want to keep the government open, and ultimately President Trump is going to get better funding for the border wall in combination with the fix on DACA.
Hugo, as you are aware, if you look at the past, the Democrats themselves had pushed for some sort of extended or expansion of border security. And now they're taking issue just on the DACA approach only and basically turning what appears to be turning their backs on any type of border security and perhaps merging the two together to move forward with some sort of common bond and bipartisanship approach to dealing with the immigration issue.
Yeah, you know, one of the ridiculous things about this is that the idea of a border wall has become something which is sort of associated with, you know, xenophobia or racism or these extraordinarily ugly things. The truth is, as everybody watching this program probably knows, is that you go through a border wall every time you get off an international flight and go through immigration. President Trump promised a wall with a door. Every time you go through immigration, you go through a wall effectively with a door, a point of entry. The building of a wall does not stop points of entry. It just makes sure that people enter the country through those points of entry rather than across, you know, other parts of the border where they're not entitled to cross. So there's a lot of demagoguing here by the Democrats. And I think that, you know, the president won and he campaigned for the presidency saying build a wall and have a door in it. So everybody knows that that's a reasonable thing, and ultimately I think the Democrats are going to have to fund that.
We will see how much politics continues to play a role in that, but let's turn to another issue where it's also political, but it's also global, and that is the deal with Iran. The president going ahead to agree with that for the temporary moment, but then moving on to, in fact, he's given it until May. And he wants some changes. He's demanding those changes, and Iran is vowing to reject those changes. So is it likely the president will get his way? And if he does, what are the implications?
Look, I think it's going to be very difficult for the president because the other people who are involved in this deal, Britain, for example, strongly back the continuation of this deal and don't want changes. Russia and China don't want changes. Iran says it's not going to it won't accept changes. But the sanctions that were imposed today show that the United States does actually have some ability to apply pressure, because not everything is encompassed by this deal. Iran is developing ballistic missiles, and the United States can impose sanctions, as it did, relating to those. And I think the thing that really needs to be remembered is that we're within just a few weeks, or just weeks, days even, of the mass demonstrations against the Iranian regime.
You're talking about the human rights violations, but I got to cut you off there. We're running out of time with our segment with you, but it was good talking to you. Obviously, we could talk about this at length. Hugo Gurdon talking to us tonight about Iran as well as DACA. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Kelly.
All right. A series of attacks targeting churches in a country that's just days away from hosting Pope Francis. We'll have the details straight ahead. Plus this new video here on the Fox Report showing the panic people in Hawaii were dealing with after that false missile alert. One family taking drastic measures, seeking refuge beneath a manhole. This as officials in Hawaii try to explain what went wrong. Coming up, more firsthand reaction to the chilling events.
This change in the shift routine happens 3 times a day, 7 days a week, 365 days out of the year. And for the most part, it occurs flawlessly.